left off on Daf Peiches Amid Beis in the bottom of the Amid, we learned a Braisa that spoke about a scenario where you had 5 groups that each one, after bringing the Korban Pesach, the hide was removed off the animal. The hides were mixed up together. They inspected and they noticed that on one of these 5 oiros, on one of these 5 hides, there was a yabelus, there was a wart, which means that that animal was a balmum. That carbon was invalid, but we don't know which group brought the invalid Korban Pesach. So the Braisa says that none of them bring the Pesach Sheni. And we're going to have to analyze as to why is that the case. Every group has a suffix, whether they were Yotzi, bringing the Pesach Rishon or not. And we're going to explain that the Braisa says that they don't bring a Pesach Sheni, not because they fulfilled the Pesach Rishon, no, but because in such a scenario, it's impossible to bring the Pesach Sheni. And we're going to have a lot of challenges on that. The Gemara is going to come along offering many creative solutions. Each one will be refuted. We'll explain why none of these creative solutions will work. And indeed, none of these 5 groups will bring the Pesach Sheni. We're going to learn a new Mishnah on Daf Peites regarding the Pesach registration. Until what point can you register? Until the Shechita. But we also learned that just like people have to pre-register, they can change their minds before a certain point. When is that point? That's a machlokes Tanakama and Rab Shimon. The Tanakama holds that just like the registration can only happen until Shechita, if you would like to withdraw from this group, from this animal, it also has to happen before Shechita. And the Tanakh Rab Shimon holds that the withdrawal can happen until the Zrika. Now, on Daf Peites Amud Beis, we're going to learn about one pre-registrant, one person of the group decided without getting permission from other members of the group that he's going to share his chelik with someone else. And we're going to see, first of all, he has the right to do that because let's say that there was so many registrant, each one is going to get, let's say, 2 kezesim or 5 kezesim. He has the right to say that I don't need to eat my 5 kezesim. I'm going to allow someone else to join in my 5 kezesim. Question is whether the other members of the group can tell this guy and the one who he invited, Gesundheit, hate, take your 5 kezesim and go eat in another location. We do not want you to eat with us. But when it comes to people that are sharing a meal, it was very common today. It's called potluck. There, the minig was everyone gave a few coins, and then collectively they bought a meal. What happens if one member of the group eats a lot more than the others? Can they tell them, listen here, it's not fair. Everyone gave more or less the same amount of money, and you're eating double, you're eating triple. Is there a point where the majority of the group can tell one, you go eat elsewhere? We're going to have a phenomenal story on this theme between Rafuna and Rafpapa that were sharing a meal, and how Rafpapa was eating a lot more than Rafuna, and if we'll have time, we'll begin now on this daf, the following Braisa. Now this Braisa is really going to be the heart of Daf Tzadik Amud Aleph. Now let's speak details about pre-registration. So we already mentioned the last year that whether you might have to make a kinyan, you might not have to make a kinyan, but appreciate of what's happening over here. Let's say, Yaakov, you bought the animal, your animal. Now, when you buy an animal and you designate it for a Korban Pesach, that animal is already consecrated. Whether you're going to have with you 2 people, your family, 5 people, or 50 people, so they're just adding, they're being added to this animal, but there's already Kedusha there. The animal does not become holier, it's consecrated. In most scenarios, if you were to open up registration on your animal, you would charge people money. Now, let's say I would want to join your group. So I take money. Before I give it to you, l'choira, I designate this money will be for my part in your Korban Pesach, which means that this money is already imbued with Kedusha. The money is holy, the animal is holy. So a very simple question. When I give the money to the owner of the animal, when you receive that money, what happens to that money? Does it remain kachim, which is not ideal for you because there's nothing you can do with it, or does it become chulin? Now, as a rule, if something is holy, if I have money that I designate for a korban, so the money has kedusha, and I buy a korban, the kedusha of the money gets transferred to the animal, and then the money becomes chulin, because the kedusha had where to go on. But the reason why the money becomes chulin is because the animal prior to the purchase was chulin. So the money was holy, the animal was chulin. So we moved the kedushas around. So the kedusha of the money goes on the animal, and the money yoytze l'chulin. If the animal is already holy, then l'chu'ura, the kedusha of the money has no where to get redeemed. Doesn't get redeemed. So l'chayda, the money that you receive should remain kachim, which is not good, which is not ideal. If you are taking money for other people to join your animal, you want to be able to use this money for chulin. The Braisa is going to state that the money goes out l'chulin, and we're going to spend, again, that's the end of Daf Peites Amud Beis, but it's really the whole first Amud of Daf Tzadik as explaining exactly how does that work. Chavra, let us start. Again, we're starting at Daf Peites Amud Beis, 5 lines from the bottom of the Amud, Amar Mar, right towards the beginning of the 5th line. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu malachenu shakol v'dvarim. It says the Braisa Amar Mar. You had these 5 groups. That was the example. In other words, there were 5 from the millions of karbanos, or from the hundreds of thousands of karbanos. 5 animals had their hides removed, and they got mixed up. And now you notice that on one of these 5 hides, there was a yabeles, there was a wart. You see, that animal was not valid. Now you don't know which group it belonged to. So the Braisa says that none of these 5 groups bring a Pesach Sheni. It's Ptura normally means they are exempt. Normally that's an expression used because they were yoitza with the Pesach Rishon. Omar Mar Ptura Pesach Sheni, fragt the Gemara, why? How can you say that? Right? And since one, we know for sure one animal was a Balmum, so l'chura, all 5 should have to bring a Pesach Sheni, meaning all of the members of all the 5 groups, because maybe they were not yoitza. Mishur answers the Gemara that the pshat of Pater doesn't mean here because they fulfill their obligation. Peturin means technically, umishum delo yefsher, since they cannot bring Pesach Sheni, so they don't bring it. But enachanami, all of these Yidden know that they might not have fulfilled the mitzvah of bringing a Pesach. And the Gemara explains why. Because hechel yavit, what should they do? Laisik ol chad v'chad Pesach, let every group buy another animal and bring it for the Pesach Sheni? No, because if you already fulfilled your Pesach Rishon obligation, it's like a chatos. If you did not sin, you can't say the animal is a chatos. If you fulfill Pesach Rishon, then that designation of Pesach Sheni is nothing, is nonsensical. And then the animal remains chulin. And if you bring it into the azara, v'kamaisi chulin azara. The arba minayu avdiluhu, because 4 were yoitza. So the Gemara counters, I still have a solution. Let all of the 5 groups together, every one of the 5 groups, buy one animal, laisi kol echad Pesach, and one of these groups are mechuyev, so this animal will takabi, and that won't be chulin. So the Gemara says that's not a solution either. Since we have this unique rule by Pesach that you have to bring it for its registrants, it has to be menuyin, nimsa Pesach nechol shaloi lemenuyav. The guys, don't confuse 2 dinim. We learned on the Mishnah Daf Samach Aleph that if you bring a carbon, both lemenuyav and l'shaloi lemenuyav, you're good. That's as far as the bringing is concerned. But no one who was shaloi lemenuyav is allowed to eat from it. Since you're going to have over here from the 5 groups, 4 of them that taka don't have to bring the carbon. So you tell me exactly who's going to eat. Anyone who's going to eat will be told you're not allowed to eat because you might be shaloi lemenuyav. And therefore, when you shech the carbon, no one is going to be allowed to eat. That we also learned. If when you shech the carbon, we know from the outset that no one will be able to eat, means the people are unfit. Here, there's another type of unfit. So then the carbon is not going to be valid. Not because you're bringing it shaloi lemenuyav, but because it can be nechol shaloi lemenuyav. So still 2 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Says the Gemara, Haimai, no, I'll find a solution. Nesi kol chad minayu pischoi. Let every group bring another animal. I got it. It might be chulun ba'azara. But v'nisnei, stipulate. We find this so often. V'nisnei v'nema, let them stipulate and say that di balmum, if the animal that we brought on Pesach Rishon was the one that was blemished, so then hay da asta hashta, then the one that we're bringing right now, the last line of the Amid is not going to have a Pesach. However, di tam, and therefore we're not mechuyev to bring the Pesach Sheni, so hay da isa hashta should be a shlamim. And bring it, so it's not chulun ba'azara. Answers the Gemara, lo yefsher. This is impossible, daf peites. Why? Mishum, since a shlamim has the two parts from it that have to be given to the Kahanim, the Ikar Chazei v'Shoik, the breast and the Yeshoik, right? Not the Zroya that goes from even from Chulin. The Zroya is the right foreleg. The Shoik is the right hind leg that has to be given to a Kohen from a Shlamim. The Kohanamu, the Achli Lei, which is right to the same issue. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to give it to a Kohen? You can't give it to the Kohen because if this is the Pesach, the Kohen, if he was not pre-registered, he cannot eat it. You understand? If this animal is not the Pesach, then you're obligated to give it to the Kohen, and the Kohen has to eat it. You have to understand that. And you can't say, you know what? Separate the Chazay and the Shoik and don't do anything. You can't do that either. You can't do that either. You can't leave over any part of the Pesach. Truth is, that's a halacha by older karbanis. You can't create a scenario where you're going to make a noisa. So says the Gemara, I'm still not happy. I still can find a solution. Let every group register with them a kohen, same concept, and they bring a carbon and make the same stipulation. And then the kohen should be the one eating the chazei v'shoik, either as the matnas kohuna from a shlamim, or that will be his chelik of the Pesach Sheni. Says the Gemara, hold on. Hai kohen heichidami. This will be the answer. If the kohen brought a Pesach Rishon, well, then it won't work. Then you can't pre-register him on a Pesach Sheni. Dilma hai Pesach. No, because maybe this one is the Pesach. This is the group that brought the Yabelas on the Pesach Rishon. And now, if this kohen already brought himself the Pesach Rishon, then himself Pesach Nachal Shaloi L'Menuyav. Because his registration is again nonsensical if he was not mechuyev to bring the Pesach Sheni. So it must be the Eid Lo Yavad Pesach. So then you're setting up this kohen for failure. Because if this kohen, for whatever reason, did not bring the Pesach Rishon, that means this kohen is mechuyev to bring the Pesach Sheni. Well, maybe this carbon is the shlamim. So who cares if the kohen will eat the chazei v'shoik, but that's going to be chazei v'shoik, that won't be Pesach. So this kohen is going to lose the mitzvah. Still the Gemara says, I have another solution. V'naisi kol chamisha chat kohen. And every group of the 5 groups should each one get a new animal. And they should all make a stipulation that we had at the end of Peiches Amid Beis. If ours was good, this is a shlamim. If ours was the one with the mum, this is the Pesach. Only bring one kohen that did not bring a carbon Pesach, and he should be manui on all the 5 animals. Now we learned also that a person cannot be registered on 2 animals. So what? Only one of the 5 is a carbon Pesach. The Liyavet Pesach. And the Nimni Ilavi, that kohen should be counted in. And Hani Chamisha Psacham on all 5. And because the Niman of Shach, this is all part of the potential solution. Ikachad, the Liyavet Pesach, and the Konaf Kibei. What he's going to eat from all of the 5, the Chazei V'Shoik, from all of the 5. No, nothing will be nicer. From the 5, 1 is not Chazei V'Shoik because one of the 5 is a carbon Pesach. So the kohen will fulfill his obligation. That's a great solution. So why doesn't the Baraisa give that as a solution? Answers the Gemara based on the whole premise of making a stipulation that since the time to eat a carbon Pesach is only that night, and according to one Tana until midnight, the time to eat a carbon shlamim is 2 days and 1 night. So Ela mishum de kamamayed bachila shlamim. You can't bring a carbon and say, if you're a Pesach, it's a Pesach. If we're obligated in Pesach. If it's not, it's a shlamim. Because what will then happen, maybe it's going to be a shlamim. Because of your doubt, you're going to have to eat it much quicker. And if you will not eat it quicker, what are you going to do? You won't be allowed to eat it. But maybe it's a shlamim and you are allowed to eat it. That's a concept we have many times in Kachel. It's called bringing a carbon lebeis hapsul. You can't ever do that. The ilu Pesach liyom v'layla, the ilu shlamim lishnei yomim v'layla echad. So such a stipulation can never be made. Even though we found a solution by finding one kohen who's going to join all 5.
I don't understand here. What's the big deal? You just won't. You don't have to eat a shlamim for 2 days and 1 night. You can. So this time they'll finish by midnight. What's the big deal? First of
all, Danny, we learned many times that in itself is definitely not ideal. It's called we're bringing a carbon lebeis hapsul. You're rushing something that God does not rush. But I'll tell you more. What happens if they did not finish it until midnight or they did not finish it until the morning? What are you going to do? Okay, you're setting yourself up to a scenario where this taka might be a shlamim, which means that you're obligated to eat it, not to make noisa, and you will make noisa. Because you have to say, maybe this was the Pesach. Okay. Frag die Gemara weiter, wenn Nesa Moiser Pesach. Now, Moiser Pesach is common by all karbanos, even by achatos, that when a person designated an animal, it's possible that the person or the group lost the animal. They lost it. So they designate a new animal, and they offer the new one, and then they find the old one. That's the normal Moiser Pesach. Now we are broadening the concept. Moiser means it's a residual one, it's an extra one. Let them bring an extra Pesach, the one that they're bringing. An extra Pesach is also bound by the Zmanim of the Pesach. A Moiser Pesach becomes automatically Shlamim, but it retains some of the limitations of a Pesach, particularly when it comes to the Zman Achilasi. That should be the animal upon which you make the stipulation. And the name of Ididi Balmum, if we brought the Balmum, which means that we're obligated to bring a Pesach Sheni, so Haida Aisa Hashtan have a Pesach. And if ours was from the four, right, 4 of the 5 were good, was Tamu, then the heavy Haida Aisa Hashta Shlamim. And you are allowed to bring, you are obligated to bring a Moiser Pesach as a Shlamim, but it also has the same Zman of a Pesach. The Moiser Pesach Nechel Liyom B'Layla Echad. So that's a good solution. Answers the Gemara, hold on. The Chi Mafreshinan Tchila L'Moisaros. Moiser Pesach means that someone designated an animal for the Pesach Rishon. Like we gave an example, and it was lost. And now this group brought another one. Then they found the original one. But you can't designate an animal from the outside and call it a residual Pesach. You can't do that. You can call something a Shlamim, but we're back to the problem of Shlamim is for 2 days and 1 night. There has to be, amongst the whole Jewish people, there's going to be a few groups that Taka designated an animal and they lost their animal and they have a residual Pesach, which is going to be brought as a Shlamim anyways. Let them make the effort to find it. You have 5 groups of people that are really mechuyev because of a suffix, and you're saying they're pater because there is no solution. This is a solution. So the Gemara gives another response. You're right. If they would find a Moiser Pesach or everything, and all of the 5 groups would have to find one coin. If one coin did not bring the Pesach Rishon, this one coin has to be Manu and all of the 5 groups. All of that would work. However, Elo Mishum Smicha, most animals, right prior to a shechita, if the one who's bringing it is a man, has a mitzvah of leaning on the head of the animal with both of his hands, called smicha, mishum smicha the ilu pesach loy boy smicha. And that's a huge help, like we mentioned. Not everyone needed to go into the azara. It's packed to begin with. And smicha always happened, hekev l'smicha shchit, that happened in the azara or right adjacent to the azara. So Pesach doesn't need smicha. If it's a moisar Pesach, which by default becomes a shlamim, then you have to do smicha. So since you can't do smicha, therefore don't bring, none of the 5 groups bring it. Says the Gemara, 1 second, hatinach, if the carbon is from anashim. However, if the carbon is nashim, maybe there was a group of women. Again, our whole sugya is going with the shita that women are obligated to bring Pesach Rishon. And if that's the case, women are exempt from smicha. That's the whole sugya that that Chazal allowed them to do as a weak smicha, but they're not obligated in smicha. So the Gemara gives another answer.
If you did smicha on a Koren Pesach, does that pass on your Koren Pesach?
No. But you're not.
Vice versa. If you didn't do smicha, is it ma'akev?
Okay, guys, Dan, we learned this. We need a coffee. Smicha. If I do smicha on kachim, I'm moil behegdish. Not women. That was the whole thing about nachas ruach. Because if I lean on an animal with all of my might, which is the way you do smicha, then I'm benefiting. When you lean on something, that's called hana'ah. Even though I'm doing it for the mitzvah, if I'm not obligated to do smicha, smicha is me'ilah. I think that was in Chagiga, wherever we learned the sugya of the nashim. So they said, do nachas ruach. They should do smicha, but they should think they're doing smicha, but they're not really doing smicha. They don't lean on it so heavy, then they're not moil. So the only solution would be not to bring it, to do something that's b'di'evet. The Gemara is going to speak to that in a moment. But before we get to that, but you have the matana, is the ilu Pesach, that we say hopefully in Karbanis every day before davening. Pesach only has one matana. You only apply it once, like we mentioned, on the 2 sides over which there is a yisoid, or under which there is a yisoid, which is on the western side or on the northern side. You have to apply it twice, and they have to be applied at the corners, and they have to spread around. That means that blood has to touch all of the four sides. Says the Gemara, that's not a good answer. That might nafkamina. Who cares if the lechatchila dika avoida of matanis of the dam is different? If shenesanam only b'matana achas, even though it's not ideal, but after the fact, b'di'evet, keep it. You got your atonement. So still, you can make one blood application, and if it's taka moisar, which means it's a shlamim, it will be an effective shlamim. So the Gemara says no. Ela mishum the ilu pesach b'shvicha. Shvicha means that the blood has to be brought mamish up until the wall of the mizbeach, either again the western or the northern, and they would pour it. The ilu shlamim, the Torah says that they have to throw it. So the way you apply it is different. Here we have a Tanya, we learned in a Brisa in Zavachim, that kol hanetonim bezrika, if shenasanim b'shvicha b'di'evet yatsa. So the Gemara answers, ema de kamrinan di'i avad. Just because there is a din that post facto it's acceptable, but lechatchila nami. So we're learning an amazing concept. Since there is no way for you to make the stipulation and lechatchila do the avoida properly, Chazal said, the Brisa is saying that we know that one of these five groups did not fulfill the mitzvah of Pesach, which comes with a Yisur Kodesh. Mitzvahs say that it carries the penalty of Kodesh. But since we cannot solve the challenge in a lechatchila way, and Tosfos says that now that the Gemara says lechatchila, that also goes on the shvicha, that goes on the other. I'm sorry, on the one matana versus the two matanas. Everything that we mentioned before, where there's a lechatchila and b'di'evet, don't come and say, well, b'di'evet it will be okay. B'di'evet, if you don't do smicha, then it's okay. No, yes, but that's not a solution. We tell all of these five groups that none of you bring the Pesach Sheni. Now, guys, let's also appreciate another part of the Shalom Pat, which is important to remember. We don't know for sure which one of the five groups were not Yoitza. You have a doubt. Here, every group will say, we were Yoitza. I cover your bases and do everything very creatively. No, because if you'll do that, you won't be able to do it lechatchila, so don't do it. Wait. And it's amazing how that is what the Tana meant when he says, Peturim lasois. Normally, Peturim means you are exempt. And really, maybe that's the pshat over here. Since there's a suffix and there's a way of saying that since there's a doubt you can be exempt of, the reason why we allow you to be exempt relying on a suffix is because there is no way to solve it. Okay, Chavra, moving on to the next mission.
Rabbi, I think there was a Rashi about this yesterday in Chumash between the Zrika and Shvicha.
Correct. Very good. Very good. Okay, says the Mishnah. Listen to this. Ha'omer Labanov. We began this Pedic by explaining that even though normally, if I want to be included in your carbon, I have to tell you so explicitly. However, there are exceptions. A wife is automatically included with the husband. She can say she doesn't want. Same thing with children. It's a family. So the father brings on behalf of his kids. So Ha'omer Labanov, a man is going to Yerushalayim. And he's telling his children, Hareini shoichedes haPesach al mi sheyala mikem rishoin liYerushalayim. The Havamina is that this father is saying that I'm bringing it only for the one that will come to Yerushalayim first. The one who's taking the animal into the Azara has to arrive in Yerushalayim in the afternoon. All the other people that are going to be eating that animal, they don't have to be in the Azara by the Shechita, which means they don't have to be near. They can be, still traveling. They can come later. So that was normal. So whoever's taking the animal came there earlier. The father wants to make sure that his kids get there on time. So he says, the Havamina, that whoever will enter Yerushalayim first, he will be included in my carbon. So says the Mishnah, Kiven shehichnes harishoin roishoy verubai. What do you mean entering Yerushalayim? So this is consistent with other dinim and halacha, that roishoy verubai is considered the person entered. So indeed, Zacha bechelkoi, he will be zoicha in his portion. But now the Mishnah ends by saying, Umizake es echav imay, that he gains portions for his brothers, and that will have to be explained. In other words, if the father Taka only had in mind the one who enters first, then how exactly does it work? How does he gain portions? How is he mezaka portions to his brothers. And l'choira, the havamina is again, he only gets the portion is only his. Now, if his portion would only be comprised of a kazayis, he cannot share it with others. But if his portion is as a zaftika piece, and even if he were to divide it himself or to give it or to bequeath it to his 10 other brothers, to his 11 other brothers, each one would have at least a kazayis, so then he can do it. Problem is that you have to be pre-registered by the shechita. The shechita happened a long time ago. He arrived in Yerushalayim way after this Koren Avodah was done. So again, this is again another time that we're saying, does that not prove that the Tanoim of our Perek, they subscribe to Bereda? Because if you don't subscribe to Bereda, he arrived after Shechita. What? How can he be mezaket to his brothers? Who is the owner who's being mezaket? Who is the bequeather and who is the bequeathee? We don't know yet. Yet it only works with Bereda. So Amar Rabbi Yechanan, that you didn't understand the whole Mishnah. The father registered all of the kids. The father only said words for the children to think that only the one who enters first will be zoiche in the animal, because kedei lazarz a mitzvahs ka'amar. No, he doesn't want for his children to Yiddish to kratz. He wants them to move, to go to Yerushalayim quickly. So he set up a competition. But the father really had everyone in mind lechatchila, which is why all of them are allowed to eat, and you don't need to rely on Bereda. And Daikanami, because it says now, that the father registered everyone is good. So the basar the shachad mikom ismani. We're going to learn in the next Mishnah that nimnin you can pre-register. You can also change your mind. You can withdraw, but only until the shechita. So shma mina, that the father from the beginning registered all of his children. And Tanya Nami Hachi, that there was a story that such a father made such a statement that the one who enters first he'll be part of my carbon, and the kadmu banais lebanim, and the daughters arrived first. And the Mishnah, the Braisa uses the words the nimsa. Came out that in that family the banais were zirizois, the ones who were swift were the daughters. Ubanim are shefalim, the sons are lazy. Now, if the father only registered the ones who entered first, the Braisa shouldn't have said that the sons were lazy. It's much worse than the Nimsa that the sons did not get the Pesach, did not fulfill the mitzvah of Pesach. The Braisa is only speaking about their swiftness versus their laziness. Is araya that everyone was yoitza. Why? Because the father had in mind everyone. Next Mishnah says the Mishnah lo olam nimnan olav. That everyone can be, you can add as many people as you want. That means even though we initially decided our group is going to buy an animal, and we're such a little group, we don't even have to bring chagigas yudalit because we're gonna come ala soiva from the Pesach, and then more people come. You can always add until the shechita. Again, always add. There is a limit. The limit is that you can't add so many people that when you divide it, no one has the kazayis. Everyone has to have at least one kazayis. Nimnin and just like you can register until the shechita. What happens if a small group, they want to make a break off? They say, you know what? We want to have our own animal for whatever reason. No problem. Until the shechita, you can add people as long as you're not taking away the kazayis from each one, and people can change their minds. And Shimon, the Tana says, no. Now, what has to be clarified in the Gemara is that when Rab Shimon is giving another cut-off time, it's not for the nimnin. Rab Shimon is minded that to register, it has to be before the shechita. Once the shechita happened, even before the zrika, you can't add other registrants. When Rab Shimon is speaking about people, the zrika, it's in order for you to be able to withdraw, that you can back out. You can back out until the zrika. Says the Gemara, Maiko Mashmulan, the ratio of the Mishnah, that until everyone has a kazayis. Haka Mashmulan, the chiddush is the aflagav the imnei olav chaburazu. Even if an entire group was registered on an animal, and as we will learn, God willing, on Daf Tzadik Tes, there are other Tanoim that hold that if a group registered and now they want to withdraw, and other people want to register on that animal, you have to have at least one of the original registrants remaining on the animal. This Tana is trying to teach you we don't need that.
Where are we up to in the shechita process here?
All before the shechita. All before the shechita. Tanakam is all before the shechita. So if all of us register on an animal, and that's what happens. And a few guys drop out, and it's about a social thing. I want to eat with you. So I also drop out, and you drop out. This Tana doesn't care. This Tana doesn't care, even if it turned out that all of the original registrants, all of them are out. Doesn't matter. So there's no registrants. Right. Meaning you have to look at further. Rab Shimon argues. Rab Shimon says Zrika. So Amar Abaye, I want you to know that the machlekes in our Mishnah between the Tanakam and Rab Shimon is only regarding limashech. It's only regarding withdrawing, backing out. That Abanan hold based on the pasuk in Shemais where it says mi hi yois mi said they withdraw from being from the lamb. So that's. You can go out, you can go away. Mechayusei deseh. You can only go away when the animal is alive. When does the animal lose its chayis? From the shechita. Rav Shimon Saba, the same words, mahavayosei deseh. As long as the avodah is being done, in other words, is life, physical life? Rav Shimon is pnimius? No, if the avodah is being done, the seh is still alive. All of that is only regarding the din that you can withdraw, which is from the mihi yois miseh. But limana is divrei hakol achi yishachet. And why is that? Because since it says in the pasuk, guys, we had this on the Samach Aleph, when the pasuk writes the michsas nefashos, according to the number of the people, and then it says that was the double lashon. Then it says tochoisu. Now tochoisu means to count. But what did we learn in the Samach Aleph? That tochoisu is a remes, also means shchita. So the source is so they can. The number of the people can vary, can go up, it can go down. Only tochoisu, only until the shechita is going up. Even according to Rab Shimon, you can only add people until the shechita. Tanya Namiyachi, clear that the machlokes between the Tanakam and the Chachamim and Rab Shimon is only regarding withdrawal. Nimnin and or umayshchenas yedeim mimenu achi yishachet. That's the sheet of the Chachamim. Rab Shimon Omer, the last line of the Amid. And clear, Nimnin also he agrees until Shechita. And based on the pasuk based on the Tochoisu, meaning Kois means Shechita. But Umoishkin Ache Yisrei Kadam, because Rav Shimon holds that as long as Avodah is being done, the animal is considered alive. Beautiful. Daf Peites Amud Beis. Says the Mishnah. Hamamane imoy acher bechelka. So let's say you brought that, you bought the animal, and you're allowing people to join. Now, normally when people join, just think about it practically. Does everyone have to consent when a new person comes? Why am I saying that? Even though Rabbi Yehuda holds, and we're following the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, that not everyone that's registered on an animal have to eat all together, but most times they ate together. So there's a social aspect. In other words, if I was content to be part of this group, normally if others are going to be added, everyone should know about it. Our Mishnah is speaking about a scenario where the others did not know about it. So you had originally a minion of Yidden, and Reuven has his chaver. Reuven, now, again, if Reuven only had a kazayas, he cannot add, you can't add anyone. But if the initial group was going to afford every member a nice piece, that you can divide them to many kazayas. So Reuven says, especially if he paid, or even if he didn't pay, if it was a gift, says, I have my shtickle. I'm telling my friend Chaim, I accept your registration. Again, whether you need a kinyan, whether it's verbal, it wasn't with the owner, it wasn't with the organizer. So says the Mishnah, first of all, he had the right to do it because he owns that chelik, and he can share it as long as he included someone else before the shechita. But the shoyin b'nei chabura litin lo yeshaloi, but the b'nei chabura, after they shech, they give that amount of meat that was going to be going to Reuven, they can give it to him, and they tell Reuven goodbye. You're not sitting with us. You didn't consult whether you can add more people. Now, guys, this is, again, all according to, remember, we had the machlokes, Eim Lamikra, Eim Lamasaitis. We're going with the shita that the korban can be divided. The people, once you begin eating in one location, you can't go to another chabura. So since there's nothing wrong with dividing the korban according to Rabbi Yehuda, then the Bnei Chabura can tell this Jew, you did not consult with us. Goodbye. Take your piece and go and eat it with whoever you decided to pre-register before the Shechita. So, now that we have this rule, now we're going to just another scenario. It's almost a humorous summit. Bnei Chabura shahayu yadav shel echad mehem yafos. Look how Chazal spoke so beautifully. Yafos means they had the nice hands. You know what nice hands means? This is B'lashon Saginon. There's one guy that eats a lot more than the others. And also we begin to understand how it worked. Let's say if we are our group, we're learning together, we're going to Mashiach is coming this year, let's eat, let's have our own Pesach. Fine. Now, we're not how much exactly everyone gets. Let's say we are a group of 18 people. We're saying we're buying an animal. More or less, each one is going to have, I don't know, 2 ribeye steaks, whatever that means. Fine. More or less. Then we discovered that one guy in this group, when we sit down to a meal, in the time that it takes me to eat the 18-ounce steak, you can eat 36 ounces of steak. There was someone that he eats a lot more in the same amount of time. That's called a person with nice hands. Nice hands means he has greedy hands. He's eating. And now everyone is going to get a kazayas, but especially if people pay, people feel it's not fair. It's not fair. Everyone gave, the animal was worth, I don't know, $1,000. Everyone gave their equal amount of money, and this guy is eating a double, triple. So can the other members tell him, Toil chelkacha. Again, we're 18 people. We're going to divide the animal before we begin eating into 18 equal parts. You take an 18th, which is what more or less should have been allocated for you, and if it's say, go eat it on your own. Again, this is all based on Rabbi Yehuda. We don't have to eat it all together. The question is, this guy says, no, this guy can say, Matzi Amalei Kabiltun, you accepted me into the group. It's not like the case in the Mishnah. The case of the Mishnah is that one registrant, unbeknownst to the others, added someone else. Here, we all know each other. Maybe you didn't know that I eat so much, but you accepted me in the group. Or the group can tell them, no, ki kabelinan, the reason why we wanted to have more people, don't forget you can't have noisa. So there is a responsibility to broaden the group, to make sure that there'll be a tikkun in the zvicha and not the opposite. So in other words, we included more people just to make sure amongst 18 people we know we can finish the animal. That's the only reason why we included you. But adata the achlat feiminon. But we never accepted that you should take more than your share, like Kabbalinach.
Rabbi.
Yes.
What's the actual question here? Meaning, is it the fact that we know that when you're in a group, you're supposed to eat it together? So now the question is, can you make an exception and push this guy out? Or
when can you tell a Jew get out of the shul? It's a social question here. It's not a shul. In other words, you have a funny scenario. You have a lot of people eating together. The Mishnah gave a scenario where the majority of the group can tell one individual, you invited more people, we don't want you to eat with us. And that guy doesn't want to leave. He says, hold on, if I pre-registered, no, you go eat by yourself. It's a social question. When does the group have the right to expel someone from the group? Here it's Moededik. It happens so often. You make a potluck, we'll have cases not even by Korban Pesach, we'll have soon in the Gemara. Many people got together. Everyone says, let's go eat dinner together. And we're going to split the bill here and off there. They paid it before they ate. And everyone gave $100. Here in LA, you eat together. Everyone gives $500. They give you a little piece of meat. But okay, you paid the equal share. And this guy doesn't stop eating. So what do you do with him? Can you tell him, listen, take the 10th or the 18th, take the whatever chelik and go over there. Go eat on another table. Okay, so Tashema, so we want to prove it from our Mishnah. It says in our Mishnah, and he did not notify the other members of the group. So Rishoyim b'nei hachabura liton yashaloi, and v'hu oichel yashaloi v'hei noichlen yashalohem. No, they could eject him. They can expel him from the group. And my tamo, lav mishum dahavalei kiyodayim shel echad mehem yofes. Why are they allowed to do it? L'cha'ira is not because they don't like him. The Havamina is because we thought we're only 10 people. Now that Reuven invited Chaim, you think Chaim and Reuven are going to eat just a share of Reuven? They're going to end up eating more. It's about a worry that one member is going to take more than the theoretical allocated portion. Now, that Yadav Yafais, that even if someone has greedy hands or nice hands, Matzi Amar Lahu, he can force himself to remain in the group by saying that Kabalitun, that you accepted me, you knew I'm here, I'm sorry, you can't expel me from the group. So Neheva Hai Ki Yadav Yafais. And the Mishnah does allow the other B'nai Chabura to eject him. So the Gemara says you can't compare one case to the other. It's not only about quantities of food. Our Mishnah has to do, we don't like Chaim. We don't like his conversation. We don't like the social aspect of Chaim. Amri, they said in the yeshiva, no, Deyoy, Shani, we don't want to have another person. But if all of the original people are the only ones here, which is the boya of the Gemara, the only problem is that one person eats a lot, but he says, you guys know me. You join me in the group. The inami tarvayu kechad m'bnei chaburi da'achli. Even if Reuven's guest Chaim, together with Reuven, will not eat extra. Together they will eat only the share of Reuven. Still, matzi amri lei deloy nichalon inish nuchra gabon. We don't want a stranger. We don't know who you are. We don't want to socialize with you. So our Mishnah is no proof to the boya of the Gemara. Nach, another attempted proof. Tashema now from a Brais. And we had this already above, based on the rule that once you start eating a meal, you have to finish your meal of the Pesach in that same location. So if you had a shamash, now not only he might even be paid to be the waiter, but he also needed to pre-register. To make it clear, every time you learn about the shamash, he pre-registered, and he's preparing the food, and he didn't think, and he ate it by the oven, right? Hashamish achel kazayis basa b'tzad taner, and that wasn't thought out because once he ate it near the oven, he can only eat it near the oven. If he realizes, smart meaning he shouldn't have eaten it b'chlal, but if he realizes that right now he will only be allowed to eat it by the oven, he might as well chaparayim. In other words, you can't eat elsewhere, so make peace with your mistake and enjoy your meal over here. Now, for him not to have to eat it all by himself, so then they're going to go and they're going to join his physical location. They're going to move the table near the oven. For Oichlan, these are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Again, Rabbi Yehuda is the one that holds that the Pesach can be divided, but the people have to stay to their place. Now, says the Gemara, why do we see from this Braisa that Ratzu in, Loi Ratzu Loi, they don't have to eat with him. Now, why wouldn't the Shamash be able to force them to eat with him? Neimalahu hakablitan, right? Right, when you accepted me in the group, we accepted to eat together. I know I shouldn't have started the meal by the Tanach, but you have to join me. So what do we see? We see from over here that one member cannot demand unconditional acceptance. And if he cannot demand unconditional acceptance, that's the connection. So maybe the guy who has a Yodayim Yafais cannot demand you accepted me. Now that we see how much you're eating, go eat, go take your share and go eat in another place. So the Gemara says, no, it's not a raya. Shani Hassan in the Braisa, the Amar, the Amri Lei. The group tells the Shamish, Ki kablinach. Yet we accepted you to be part of the group. But that was a daita de nitrach. Come on, you were the Shamish. We know where we want to eat. We want to have someone to trouble himself to help us eat. We want you to serve us. That is what we agreed for. Serving us means, including, we want to eat in our dining room, not near the oven. But lemitrach lon lididach, for us to have to trouble ourselves to move to your location, like kablinach. But that has no saying to the case of the boya, where everyone is eating in the same place. Everyone knew all the people that are involved. And now one guy turns out is eating away. He's a greedy hands or nice hands. That's different. So Tashema, another attempted proof. It says in another Brais, B'nei Chabura, clearly, Shahaya Yadav Shel Echad Mehem Yafais, Rishoyim Loimar, they could tell him, Toil Chelkacha. They approximated it. And would say, and go eat. First of all, that's clear. That means a group, once they notice that someone is eating a lot more than the others, they can tell them to leave. And now the Braisa adds, and this is not only true by the Koren Pesach. V'lo elafilu chamisha v'asu si voiles. Right? Today you would call this potluck. Then it was a similar, everyone gave a selah. So they're having a su'udah worth 5 saloim. 5 people get together. Each one gives a selah. With that, they buy the food that's enough for everyone. And then they realize that one guy is eating not one selah, one guy is eating 2 selah worth. He's eating more. We always have the right to eject a gluttonous eater. So indeed, says the Gemara Shmamino. Now the question is, why did the Braisa have to add that additional case? What's the novelty? Says the Gemara, when it comes to a Pesach, that the Matzi Omnilei, there it makes more sense for the Roiv to eject the individual who's eating too much. They accept it in the group, because by Pesach, there's a reason why we were looking for more people, not to come to Noisa. Ki kablinach was litakoni zvicha. That would have been a logic that is unique to Pesach. But you would think, ala afilu sivaylas nami, when it's not a Koren Pesach. Why did we, to begin with, accept that person? Listen, we're gathering together. The whole purpose is not to fulfill a mitzvah. It's the tzafsa ba'alma. It's just about getting together. And he can argue, guys, you wanted me to join the group. Don't shame me. Mamash kamsa bar kamsa. But no, they're telling him you're eating too much. They can still tell him, toil chelka chavitzei. Ikada amri, other people had another version. That there was never a question whether he can be ejected. For sure he can be ejected. We're not changing the bin. That was not even the boy. The question was, b'nei chabura r'shoim l'chalek, or einam r'shoim l'chalek. In other words, forget about someone with greedy hands. Forget about greedy hands. We all registered together. Something happened, and we decided, you know what? I'm not in the mood of having my Koren Pesach with you. You go eat, and I'm going to eat by myself. Can there be a division of the group without any justification? That was the boy. And Tashema, they brought the Braisa, B'nei Chabura, Shahoyu Yodav Shel Echad Mehem Yafais. If one person has greedy hands, then Rishoyim Loimaloi Toil Chalka Chavetzei. So they proved from that Braisa that there has to be a reason. Yodav Yafais in. But Stam Ein Yodav Yafais. And to tell a Yid that he was included in the group, he's not even going to eat more. Like there's a limit. Epis Abbas Yisrael there has to be. But if there's not now, the other side is he's eating too much. If you don't have that excuse or that reason, then you cannot expel him from the group. Indeed, Shlamino. Okay, and now we have a story, and there's the big moral in the story. Rav Papa and Afuna, the Rav Yeshua, guys. This is not about the Koren Pesach. This is Tam. They were eating bread together. And the Stama was the same setting. Either they all prepaid more or less for, if there were 2 people, each one paid half of the bill. During the time that Rav Huna ate one measurement, during that same amount of time, Papa arba. Not double, not 4 times the amount. So Rav Huna says, whoa, let's stop right now. Let's divide the food in half. You can eat quicker than me, but let's go with plagli. I want to get I paid for half. Rav Huna is saying you're gonna leave me a fourth. It's not fair. Mamash, what happened there? So Amalei, so Rav Papa tells him, Kablitun, and 1 second, you accepted me as a partner. So Eisvei Kohana to Yufta, Rav Huna brought what we had from our Mishnah. He brought what we had above in the Amit, and Vishani Kiddushanina. It's not the case, he says. Rav Papa responded to the first 2 boyas from the Mishnah, from the first Braisa, as we responded above. So then Rav Huna brought him from the B'nei Chabura. Amalei, no. Hastam the Amrilei ki kablin latkoni zvich. He brought him the Braisa from the Koren Pesach, and he says, no, Koren Pesach is different. Because Koren Pesach, there you can force someone to leave the group. You can eject someone because lachatchila you only added him for there not to be nicer. But then when he brought the final proof, Eisvei from Siboiles, there the Braisa says clearly that even if it's a stam meal, not Pesach, if someone is eating too much, if someone has yada yafais, he can be told to leave. So because of that proof, the first white line, plagle. So Rav Huna succeeded in getting Rav Papa to take half of the meal and to go away. Now, Rav Huna did not want to eat by himself. He was lonely. So he invited someone else. Also, a lot of Ravina. You know what Ravina did? Ravina ate double of Rav Papa. So Ada Ochel Rav Huna Bereid Rabbi Yeshua 1. So this Ravina was eating 8 portions. Hat him gar nicht geholfen. So Rav Huna says, you know what? I regret that I expelled Rav Papi or Rav Papi. I'm sorry. He writes Rav Papi. I think I made a mistake over here. Interesting. That Meya Papi, maybe it's the same one. Papa Rav Papi. Meya Papi v'loy chader Ravina. Now you can ask, why is that? Ravina was only eating 8. You know, two Papis should be like one Ravina. It doesn't matter. It's because he was making him nervous. It's like before you blink, you look at the table, you're eating with the group, there's nothing left. He was like eating it so quick. And the moral is that okay, maybe you don't have to divide your meal with someone that has yod of yafos, but once you begin a meal, if you think that getting rid of him is going to solve your problem, it's going to bring bigger problems. Okay.
I think the pape is just
I know. Just an expression.
Many papas.
Many papas. Correct. The theory that we came up many years ago is that Rab Abba maybe became papa, tate. So you have papa, papi. You know, that's the Rab Papa. Okay. So as we mentioned, let's start. We have time, and then we'll have to repeat this in the next stuff. There's one simple klal. When something is holy, now certain items have such a high level of kedusha that you cannot remove the kedusha from it. Fine, that's an items that have kedusha saguf. But normally, if something, let's say, is consecrated to the bedek habayis, if something doesn't yet have this higher level of kedusha saguf, it can be holy, and you can redeem it. But whenever you redeem kedusha, the kedusha has to go on something. The something upon which the kedusha is going has to be chulin. If something is already consecrated, it cannot be used, right, to redeem the kedusha off another item. And coming over here, speaking about, based on the Mishnah we had today on Amud Aleph, that you can constantly add new people to the group. So imagine you brought a Koren Pesach, you're magdashit. Once you brought the animal of Pesach, it's a holy animal. More people want to join the group. And let's say normally you don't have to gift. You can tell a person you want to join my group. To join this group, it's cost whatever, $1. It costs $10, $100. Now, the money that I designate to have a buy-in, I was magdish that money, because once I designate that this money is for the Koren Pesach, so this money also has kedusha. But there's a problem now, because now when I give the money to the owner, normally the owner wants to take the money to use it for his stuff. The money should remain holy, which is not good for the owner, but there's nothing he can do with it. Why would the money remain holy? Because exactly where would the kedusha of the money go on? If there is an animal that's not yet holy, like if I designate money to buy a carbon shlamim, the money is holy. But when I go to the market and I buy an animal as a shlamim, what happens is that the kedusha of the money goes into the animal. The animal now is consecrated. The vendor who received the money is chulin. Perfect. There was a pidyon, there was a redemption. Here, the money that I'm using to buy in a Koren Pesach should remain holy, but it doesn't. It is chulin, and the question is, how does that work?
Rabbi, so this is dafka after the animal's been bought by the
dafka
right?
Animal, very good, Yaakov. So let's say it's your animal. So when you buy the animal from the marketplace, it's not a problem. More than that, Yaakov, if not for the Mishnah that we learned today in Peites, then maybe everyone has to buy it together. Like if the only time to register is prior to buying the animal, then there's no problem, because the animal is chulin. All of the money is holy. Everyone chips in together. All of that money goes out l'chulin. But now that we're saying that up until the shechita, you can add more people. At that point, the animal is already mukdash. It's Koren Pesach. Says the Braisa that hamamana acherim imoy, whether it is others to join the Koren Pesach, whether it is to join the Chagiga. We're speaking about Chagigas Yud Dalid that is always brought together. The one who received the money, right? The one who laid out the money. And we learned on top of the Amid, and you have to get permission if you're diminishing other people's. Everything is done with consent. The recipient of the money, ma'oi shebeyaday, is chulin. That's the problem. That's our challenge. Now the Braisa gives other dinim. The other dinim we'll learn right now, and then the reisha of the Braisa will leave for Daf Tzadik. Another din in this Braisa, that hamoicher oilasoi ushlamov, if you have your oila, if you have a carbon shlamim, and for whatever reason you sold it to someone else, so the Braisa says lo yasav lo klum. since it is already a oila, it's already a shlamim, it belongs to God, even though it's yours enough that it's going to be brought for you. But it's not yours to sell. So if you made a sale and you received money, garnished. Now, if the sale is invalid, so then the monies l'chu'ura should belong to the purchaser. Says the Brayso that no. Umois, kol shehein, we'll see what any amount of this money, even the kol shehein of this money, has to be used linadava. In the Beis Hamikdash, we're going to learn this in Masechta Shkolim. There were 13 shoifros. Shoifra means a pushka. Some of them were designated. The money in there was used that whenever the Mizbeach was idle, so then they would buy new karbanos and they would offer it. That's called to offer as kates hamizbeach, as dessert for the altar. So that money is consecrated. So now let's focus on the latter part of the Brayso, which makes so much sense because the animals were already, so to say, God's. So you don't have the right to sell them. Then the money should go back to the ones who paid for it. So the Gemara says, it was a non-sale, but they did it as a knas. A knas on the one who purchased, no one is going to benefit. It's the one who thought he's buying the animals, the one who gave the money, he will lose his money and he won't get the animals. Now, what is the meaning of kol shehein? All of the money because of the knas should go in a dava. So the Gemara says, yeah, all of it goes in a dava, but there's an additional chiddush that let's say the animal was worth 4 coins. And this purchaser paid for it 5, and you can argue that enechanami, the animal itself, did not belong to the original owner, even though it's going to be brought for the original owner, but it's not his to sell. So for the value is garnished. But maybe the additional coin, why did he pay 5 for something that's worth 4? Because he wanted to give him a gift. Maybe let the original owner at least keep that kol shehein, afilu b'ahi yisei nami. Kansura banan. Okay, and let's read the kasha. We'll repeat this kasha in the next year. So that explains the latter part of the Brayso. But we're going to focus now on the opening of the Brayso. That when you keep on adding more registrants and they're giving money that they already designated for Pesach to the one in charge, the Brayso says that mo'os shebeyodoi become chulin. So Amarullah the itema Rab Oishia. Maybe the Yidden in Babylonia, maybe the Yidden in Babel, they understand the reason, how does it work? The High Milsa, the Reish of the Brayso, and here's the problem. The original guy already spent the money on the Pesach. It's already a designated Koren Pesach. The person who's buying, he's registering by giving money. Before he gave the money, he designated that money for the Pesach. So there's Kedusha on the money. And normally, no problem. It's going to be redeemed by it going on the animal, but here the animal is already Kodesh. Eich Hegdish Chalal Hegdish. Doesn't work that way. Because it says Moishe b'yodei chulin. The Moishe b'yodei should not be chulin. That's the problem that we will have to resolve, God willing, in the next year, in the next Daf Tzadik.
Yeah.
It's going to be a very unusual Amid. This I want you to know. It's written in a very unusual Seder. All right, here we go, Chavre. With the help of Hashem, we are learning PESACHIM Daf Tzadik. PESACHIM Daf Tzadik, the Amud Aleph, is coming to give a very important explanation to a din that we learn in a Brayso that we have on the bottom of Daf Peites Amud Beis, the Brayso in the second wide line. So let's chazer the din of the Brayso, and the Daf Tzadik has to be learned Baal Peh. It's very difficult to learn it inside, and once you speak it out so much Baal Peh, then the reading it inside becomes very, very easy. So here's the issue. Now that we established that there's already a group that already bought an animal. It's a bought animal. It's an animal designated for a Pesach. Up until the Shechita. Up until the Shechita, you can continuously add new people as long as each one will have at least a kazayas. Now, you can add people as a gift with their consent, but normally you would add people by charging money. When people buy in a Korban Pesach, normally what would happen is that they designate that money. This is my ma'os for my Pesach. And now I'm looking in Yerushalayim for a group. Chevra, is their room? My family is 18 people. Who has 18 openings on their animal? That's what would happen. And then I would give them the money. The question is, the one who brought the animal in the beginning, the one who's going to be receiving the money, what is the status of that money? The emes is that we're going to learn on Daf Tzadik. It's a very interesting order. On Daf Tzadik, really, we're going to learn it's a machlokes Rabbi and the Chachamim. And the Chachamim really limit the usage of that money. Rabbi is a lot more liberal in how the money can be used. There's a machlokes amoraim b'shitas Rabbi. We're going to be beginning the whole sugya based on the understanding in Rabbi that the money is mamish chulin. That means that the owner can use this money for business. And the question is, the challenge is, how is that possible? The animal is already holy. The animal was already designated for a Korban Pesach, Hegdish. The monies that were separated by the new people were also already designated for the Pesach, so they also already have Kedusha. And the rule is, Ein Hegdish Chalal Hegdish. For you to deconsecrate something that's holy, you have to move the Kedusha to something that prior to that redemption, that other item was chulin. So the Hegdish from one goes on the chulin of the other. And then they change places. So that which was Mukdash now becomes chulin. That which was chulin now becomes Hegdish. That works. But here, if both items to begin with already were holy, so that Ein Hegdish Chalal Hegdish. So how can, and the Brisa says that Ma'oi should be Yodei chulin. That's the problem. How does that work? Now, really, there would be two ways of understanding it. One option would be that when the original owner or the original group, when they purchased the Korban Pesach, they did not imbue it with full Kedusha. That they held back some of the animal that it should remain chulin. Since they knew that if they want, they are theoretically allowed to add more registrants. So lechatchila, they limited the kedusha of the animal. That would be one way of understanding it. Now that's a chiddush that such a thing could be done, but that would be one approach. So since some of the animal was not fully holy, so if other people buy in, so the kedusha of their money is going to go on that part of the animal that was lechatchila not consecrated. That's one way. The other way, the other approach would be, is that when anyone designates money for Pesach, they don't imbue the money with full Kedusha, as we would if I'm buying money to buy my oila, if I designate money to buy my shlamim. The money that's designated lechatchila was designated that it shouldn't have that much Kedusha. So either there's a limit in the Kedusha of the animal, or there's going to be a limit in the Kedusha of the money. It's either one or the other. There's no other way to explain it. Now, put that aside. Another very important din. The din is that there's a pasuk in Parshas Kiseitze that says that if someone paid a zoina with an animal, and we're going to learn, it's really a very limited window as to exactly when would he have given the zoina the payment. But if this will be payment for a harlot, that animal is called esnan zoina, and the Torah says explicitly that leisavi esnan zoina umechir kelav. But let's speak about the esnan zoina. That may not be offered as a korban. Now we have a Mishnah and Tamura. The Mishnah and Tamura says that if someone gives a zoina, that she should have a part, or she should own a korban that's already consecrated, says the Mishnah, based on a pasuk, that korban does not become forbidden, but it's based on a pasuk. And when people learn that Mishnah, they don't understand, why did we need a pasuk? If an animal is already consecrated, then again, it's not yours to give it to a Zaina. Like we learned at the end of last year, the second part of the Braisa, that if I already designated a carbon, shlamim, for me, I cannot sell it. It's not mine to sell. So l'chayra, the din in the Mishnah in Temura is obvious. Of course, if a person is giving a Zaina a already pre-consecrated carbon, that animal is not going to become forbidden. It's not the owner's property. However, Rabbi Oishia explained the Mishnah in Temura by saying that the Mishnah follows Shitas Rebbe. Rebbe is the one that subscribes to the whole topic we are discussing, that Ma'ois Shebeyadoi Chulin. The way Rabbi Oishia, how does that answer the question? I'll tell you how that answers the question. Obviously, Rabbi Oishia, when he's saying that the reason why the Mishnah in Temura says, that based on a pasuk, that if a man gives a Zaina a pre-consecrated carbon, it does not become forbidden, that follows Rebbe, it means that Rabbi Oishia understands option number one. But when it comes to a Pesach, the animal itself is never fully consecrated. And therefore, if you can add other registrants, maybe the Zaina also wants to bring a carbon Pesach. So this person says, well, you want to join our group on payment of your service. Since the animal was not fully consecrated, that's the way Rabbi Oishia understands, and that is Shitas Rebbe. So without a pasuk, you would think that she will prohibit the whole animal because the animal was not fully holy, which means some of it still belongs to the original owner. That's why you need a pasuk. So Abaye is going to say like this: if not for Rabbi Oishia, whom I respect, if not for him explaining that the Mishnah in Temura is following Rebbe, I would have learned Pshat and Rebbe, not that when you consecrate an animal, there's a limit in the Kedusha on the animal. I would have explained the Braisa option number two, that monies that are designated for a carbon Pesach are never fully consecrated. The owner lechatchila knows that whoever is going to be receiving it will end up using it l'chulin. But Abaye is saying, since I respect Rabbi Oishia, and he chose to explain the Mishnah in Temura like Rebbe, which means that he understands Pshat, must be that there is a limit in the Kedusha in the carbon Pesach, so therefore I'll accept. I will acquiesce to Rabbi Oishia's understanding, and that's the way I will explain the Braisa that we are basing. We're trying to explain that the reason why Moy should be Yadei Chulin is not because there is a limit in the Kedusha and the money, but because there's a limit in the Kedusha of the animal. That's more or less the whole Tzaddik Amud Aleph. And then we're going to have in the bottom of the Amud, we're going to have a Mishnah, which we spoke about that dinner already in the past. Yes, people who are registering on the carbon Pesach have to be able to eat it, whether they have to be healthy, not a chayla or a zaken, whether they have to be in a status of tahara, which allows them to eat. Question is, when must they be allowed to eat it? On the 14th or at night? You have to eat it at night. So l'chayr, if someone is on his or her last day of Tumah, and then night is going to come, they will be tired at night, so they could be included in the carbon Pesach, even though during the Zman of the Shechit and the Zirik of the Avodah, they're still Tamei. That is what the Mishnah is saying. However, the big machlekes we're going to have enough tzaddik on the base is that if you have a person that is Tamei Tumah Sheretz, which is relatively a very low level of Tumah, Tamei Sheretz goes to the mikvah, and at night they become fully tahar, they can eat kachim. If someone has Tumah Sheretz on the 14th, there's a machlekes amayroyim whether you can shecht for that person or not. And Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav that ain't sheichten v'zorken al Tamei Sheretz. Ula is the one that says yes, you can shecht on a Tamei Sheretz, and the Gemara is going to have to explain. Our Mishnah gives many examples of people that are Tamei on the 14th, but they will become tired at night. In the Mishnah, there's no machlokes. What's the difference between Tamei Sheretz and the ones that the Mishnah is mentioning? We'll have to explain that. We're actually going to beautifully clarify something about this Tamei Sheretz. I know we spoke about it many times in the past. Remember, if you have half of the community, half Toyd, half Tamei. And then the Gemara gave an eitzah, be Mekama, one more Yid, right, to bring it into the Roiv Tameim in order to activate the dispensation. Can you be Mekama them with Tamei Sheretz? We're going to clarify some of those parts that we already had before. And because of speaking about Dinei Tumah V'Tara, we will also have an opportunity to review some basic laws of Nida and a Zava. Zava Getana, Zava Gedoyla, V'chuli. Okay, so Chavra, we left off mamish on the top of the Amit, and we're coming here to explain the rationale behind the din and the Braisa. When the Braisa says Mo'is Shebiyadei Chulin, and guys, remember, really, it's a machlokes between Rebbe and the Chachamim. The Chachamim don't subscribe to Mo'is Shebiyadei Chulin. Rebbe does. Really, there's a machlokes Amoraim how to understand that machlokes. But our whole Gemara is predicated in understanding that the Rebbe that says that the owner can use the money for whatever he wants, it means kepshutai. Rebbe is like the sheet of the Braisa that the one who received money from new registrants, that money is taka chulin. How can it be chulin? Ein hegdish chalal hegdish. So again, Balpe Abai is saying that I would have explained it by saying that the money that everyone designates to buy a carbon Pesach, that money never was imbued with real Kedusha. Or there's a certain holding back of Kedusha. There's a limit to that consecration of the money. Lechatchila, the person designated the money with the knowledge that if I'm going to buy in on another carbon, the owner should be able to use the money for whatever he wants. That is what Abaya would have said. However, so Amar Abaya, if not, that Rab Oishe would have explained the Mishnah in Temura that says that if someone, as payment to a zoina, allows the zoina to be part of a carbon, well, the Mishnah there really says he's giving her a carbon that's pre-consecrated. Rab Oishe said that Mishnah is specifically speaking about the carbon Pesach. And Aboishi is coming to explain why do we have to find a pasuk from where we learn that carbon does not become invalidated. Who needs a pasuk? If you have a carbon that's already pre-consecrated, so it's not his to give it to a zoina, of course, him giving it to her should not have an effect. And Aboishi went ahead and he explained, no, that Mishnah is only referring to a Pesach. Him giving her a pre-consecrated carbon is only when he's giving her a buy-in, a chelik in the Pesach. And the Mishnah is following Shitas Rebbe that holds that Ma'oi Shebiyadei Chulin, that Shitas Rebbe, and which means what is Rabbi Oishia saying? That there is a limit in the kedusha of the animal. When we buy an animal until the shechita, since we know that we can add in more people, from the outset, we don't fully consecrate the animal. That's the way Rabbi Oishia explained, and that's a great explanation, because based on that shita, some of the animal is chulin. If some of the animal is chulin, and now I am using that chulin, which is mine, I own the animal, and I'm, God forbid, giving that to payment to a zaina, then her ownership should have asered the whole carbon, because some of it is esnan zaina. That's why you need to have a pasuk to say that nonetheless it doesn't prohibit it. Now, if Abai says, if not for Rabbi Oishia explaining it that it goes according to Rabbi, then I would have had a whole different approach. A third line, Hava Mekmin Allah, I would have explained the Mishnah in Temura. The whole kasha is not a kasha. Guys, there's a general machlokes when it comes to all kachay kalim, including Pesach, but not only Pesach. How do you view kachay kalim? Who does it belong to? Don't forget that the owners will eat some of it. Do you view it like Mammon Balim, or do you view it as Mammon Gavaya? I'll give you a great example. This is a din in Nizak, and also last week, Parshas Mishpatim. If I steal something from you, God forbid, I have to pay you kefil. If I, God forbid, steal something from God, it can be me'ilah, I don't pay kefil. I don't pay double. If you have a kachem kalam carbon in your possession, and a Reuven comes and steals it, and they catch Reuven, does he have to pay kefil? Machlokes Tanoim. Rabbi Yosef Aglili says that kachem kalam is always viewed as mamin ba'olam. Now, so says Abaya, I respect Rabbi Oishia, who's an Amoira, but Abaya had the biggest derecheretz. He's from an earlier generation. He says, if not for Rabbi Oishia, I would have explained the Mishnah in Temura that needs a pasuk to explain why if someone gives a pre-consecrated animal to a zoina as exchange for her service, the pasuk says it does not invalidate it. Why do we need a pasuk? Because that Mishnah follows Rabbi Yosef Aglili. Rabbi Yosef Aglili considers kachem kalim always to be mamin ba'alim. So therefore, you, Taka, would have thought without a pasuk that giving it to a zoina will invalidate it. Avol ba Pesach, but I would not have understood that the animal that's already bought as a carbon Pesach, loy mishayed inish, a person does not retain some personal ownership in the carbon. Abaye is saying what I would not have said it. I would have understood the pshat in Shitas Rebbe. I would have explained the pshat in the Braisa that we are trying to explain the Braisa nach Peitesam at base that moi shebeyodei chulin that b'mois vade mishayir inish, that when people designate money to buy a carbon Pesach, it's not that they're really magdish the money full-fledged. They know that this money is really, it's going to be used to buy a carbon Pesach, but the owner should be allowed to do whatever they want with it. The me'ikara ki mafresh lahu adaita.
Are we talking about where he already bought the carbon? So he already spent the money.
No, Danny, you bought the carbon. You're in charge of the group. But now you are receiving more people. The first buy-in to the animal is not a problem because the first people that bought the group, the money, let's say, is fully kaddish, but the animal seller, the animal was completely chulin. The first purchase is not a problem. Now you're adding. And Vaha Rebbe, and I would have said, Zokt Abaya, that the Braisa that we are trying to explain, the Braisa of Peitesam at base, follows Rebbe. Why Mo'i Shebeyodei Chulin? Rebbe, we're going to learn later in the Braisa says that the owner can use the money for whatever they want, and we're going to learn Pshat that he means Take for anything. And why is that? Umishumachi Mo'i Shebeyodei Chulin. But again, but Abaya says, I never would have learned Pshat. I would not have said that the Pesach Lemishayid Inish. People don't hold back some Kedusha in the animal. It's only option number 2. It's only Ubamois Vade Mishayid Inish. The Kamoiki Lorab Oishe Kerebi. Loy Mokminon Le'ano Kerebi. It's all elaborate. I would not have said, what Rabbi Oishe says, I would not have said that the Mishnah in Tumura is following Rebbe. Because according to the way Abaya would have learned Pshat in the carbon Pesach, since Abaya says, I would have held that the Pesach loy mishayid inish, so that doesn't answer the kasha we have on the Mishnah in Tamura. Because if Pesach loy mishayid inish, if the animal is fully consecrated as a carbon Pesach, then of course, if he tells the Zoyna, you can join us in our carbon, of course it will not invalidate it because it's already consecrated. It's already fully holy. It's only a b'mois mishayid inish. The mikara ki mafresh lo adat adachim mafresh lo. And furthermore, for all like a loik mikar Rabbi Yosi, right? I cannot say that the Mishnah in Tamura follows Rabbi Yosi Aglili. I would not be able to say that. Why not? That's another way of explaining it. All kachim kalim, including Pesach, all kachim kalim is malim. But that's not an option. You know why that's not an option? Because it says in that Mishnah in Tamura, or there is a Braisa that is elaborating that Mishnah in Tamura. Right after it says that if you give a pre-consecrated carbon to a Zoyna, because the Tani law, no, I take that back. But Rabbi Yosi means that the Braisa that we learned yesterday, that I can't say follows Rabbi Yosi Aglili. And again, that would have been a good solution. That why does the Braisa say Mo'i shebiyodei chulin? Why Mo'i shebiyodei chulin? Because all kacham kalam is called mamin balam. So hegdish is being chal on mamin balam. Hegdish can be chal on chulin. That can be. Because if the Braisa would have been Rabbi Yosi Aglili, then why did it say the second in the Braisa? That if someone owned a oila's kacha, or a shlamim, and they sold it, so the sale is invalid, according to Rabbi Yosi Aglili, the sale should be valid. So all of this is Abaya is telling the group that we're schwitzing on the Braisa, I could not have said the Braisa is Rabbi Yosi Aglili. I would have learned that the Braisa is Rebbe, but I would have understood Pshat in Rebbe. I would have understood that when the money is where there is a limitation in Kedusha. There's a shiur, the Kedusha Smamin. However, Abaya says, I respect Rabbi Oishia. The Mishnah in Tamura, he says it follows Rebbe. If Rebbe would have been, if Pshat and Rebbe would have been that there's a shiur and the money, it wouldn't have answered anything. The fact that he's using Rebbe to faren for Pshat and the Mishnah in Tamura is araya shma minei, that the Rebbe understands that afilu bepischar mishayir inish. Okay, and I acquiesce. Bottom line is, Abaya is accepting Pshat like Rabbi Oishia, And that answers the Braisa as well. What does it answer Pshat in the Braisa? What was the kasha? The kasha is, how can the ma'ois go out l'chulin? Ein hegdish halal hegdish, says Abai. The answer is because of Rabbi Shia, is that when we buy a carbon Pesach, it's not fully consecrated. If it would be fully kodesh and you would now give money to our group, that money would not be chulin. But since the animal to begin with is part kodesh, part chulin, so there's enough chulin left in the animal that chulin is going to be used to be paid the kedusha in the money. Beautiful. That's all. Now what we have to do is, now the Gemara has to quote Rabbi Ishia. So we're gonna read inside what we learned by heart. Then we're gonna have to quote the Rebbe in the Chachamim. To understand the first few lines, the organizers of this piece of Gemara, like you have to already know Rabbi Ishia. It's like they're speaking in code. And they have to know Rebbe in the Chachamim, but now the Gemara wants to speak it out. The second wide line. Ma'id Rabbi Ishia, the Tanan. This is the Mishnah in Temurah. That if a man at that window when he gives then something to a zoin, an animal, the Torah says that animal can never be brought as a carbon, giving an animal for the service of a zoina, that nastan la mukadashin, that if he's giving her something that's already designated to be a carbon, be'esnana, as her payment, says the Mishnah, harei elu mutarin. Now guys, akan, it's not a kasha, but as we'll see, there's a whole reason, and the problem is who even needed the reason. It remains mutar. However, another din, that if a man gives a zoina birds that are prior chulin, well, that's a esnan zoina. Now, of course, if a man gives her an animal, that's an explicit pasuk in Parshas Kiseitze, but the Mishnah is being machadish that the same thing goes on birds. Harei elu asurin. And now this is all part of the Tanach. Shahoya badin, logic would have said the opposite. That what? That im mukadashim. When it comes to animals, shahamum poisel bahem, a blemish invalidates a carbon. Yet, ein esnan umechir chal alehen, if it was previously mukadashim. So we would have said that birds that bechlal have a lower standard. The bar is lower. Where do we see that we are less careful by birds when it comes to the mizbeach? Because of the klal, right? Ein tamus, remember? V'zachrus b'oifus. Even though there's ways of ascertaining whether it's male or female, it's very difficult and it makes no difference. Unlike by all animal karbanis, even though some karbanis can come both from male or female, but the Torah has to specify so clearly. And coming back to our din of tamus, an animal has to be tam, not a balmum. So you would think, Einoy din she'ein esnanu mechil charaleim. And how do you know indeed this rule that if a man gives a zoina, a bird or birds, that this is included in the isur of loisavi esnan zoina to the house of God? So it says in Tisei, say the words lechol neder, which is extra. Lechol neder l'Rabbi says oifis. Now the Tanach, this is all part of the Tanach. The Tanach continues. So I have a kasher kalbo chaymer l'mekudashim ha'ata. Now, based on this klal, that even a bird should be included in the isur, is included in the isur of loisavi esnan zoina. So why don't I say ma oifis? That normally when it comes to other prati dinim, we're more lenient. She'ein hamum poisel bahem esnan umechir. Nevertheless, esnan mechir chalaleim. So why don't I have a kalbo chaymer that mukdashim when it comes to animals that were previously consecrated? B'chlal, we're more strict because if it gets a blemish at any point, shamum poisel bahem is einoy din she'esnan umechir chalaleim. It should be chal. So Talmud loimer lechol neder. From where we learn, neder means prat lin nadur, something that was already donated is not included in the isur. That's the Mishnah. And the problem on the Mishnah is, to which Rabbi Oishia gave the answer, we already spoke it out by heart. Elo Talmud, the cause of Rachmana neder? You needed the word neder? What are you telling me? Holafaki, without the word Shlucha neder, havamina, that what? That mukdashim, once, even though it's already consecrated, chal isur esnan aleyan? Why? Now, like we said above, you know what Abaye would have answered? I'll give you the answer. That this Mishnah is referring to all Kachay Kalam, not only Pesach. Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds that Kachay Kalam is Mamain Balim. Since it's Mamain Balim, then you would think that, since he's giving her that animal, it will become Aser. But Rabbi Yossi didn't answer that. Rabbi Yossi did not say the Mishnah Temurah is following Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Yossi is saying this is only about a Pesach. And following Shitas Rebbe, The Mishnah and Talmud is only b'mamana zoyna al pischoi, and based on Rabbi, that we'll learn in a moment. Rabbi, and again, there's really a machlokes how to learn pshat and Rabbi, but based on the understanding of Rabbi, like we had in the Braisa, that's taka chulin. Why would it be chulin? Rabbi Oishia understood, not the way Abaye would have understood. Not that there's a limit to the kedusha in the money. No, Rabbi Oishia understands shitas Rebbe that the reason why Moshe b'yadei chulin is because the animal was never really fully consecrated. Now, if my Pesach is not fully consecrated without l'chol neder, then one would have thought that if the person, God forbid, on chutzpah, he's not using the korban Pesach, her buy-in for her services. But the din, you would have thought that she asers the korban. So that's why l'chol neder, that even though there is a shiur in the kedusha, the Torah is megala that she doesn't aser it. And now the Gemara wants to know, where do we have shitas Rebbe? My Rebbe, the Tanya. When it says in Parshas Boive im yimat habayis mihiyois miseh, that if the household is too small, or a group, notes, we bought a lamb and we take a look at the lamb. Maybe when we bought it, we were starving. Yeah, we'll finish it. Then we take a good look and we chop. Too little people for such a big lamb. In other words, we're going to add more registrants. Mihiyois miseh. So says the Tana, hachayeyu miseh. When you're going to get other people to join you by buying their share, the money has to be used, the proceeds has to be used for the lamb itself. That's the shita, not like the Braisa. That's the shita that the money is not chulin. No, the money that you receive has to be used for the lamb. And you know what? Only michdei achila. Only for eating the lamb. We'll learn details. What does that mean? But you can't, the owner cannot, listen, he paid out of pocket, but the money that's coming in is not chulin. He can't take the money and buy a shirt. He can't take the money and use it for business. The money remains holy. That is the chachamim. Rabbi Yomer af michdei mekach. Now again, what does Rebbe mean? There's a machlokes. Everything we learned until now, including the Braisa on Daf Pei Tesamid Beis, understands mamish, anything he wants. In other words, she'im ein loi. So if a person is coming Pesach, and this year they upped the price of the matzah, doesn't cost $80. Now one matzah costs $150. They're every year more expensive. And he ran out of money. So it's good for you to know that you already bought your korban Pesach. This is all Rebbe talking. You simply include other people and you'll make some money. Or and va'al chagigosai. As long as this is done before the shechita, it's fine. As long as the other people prior are going to have at least a kezayis, it's fine. And according to the Mishnah we learned on Daf Pei Tesamid Beis on the top, he should really consult with the other members as far as eating it in the group is concerned. Don't add new people that they don't know about. But you can do all that. Umay shebeyodei chulin. The words of Rabbi is the same words of the Braisa. And Rabbi is explaining himself, Sha'al Manas Kain, Higdishu Yisrael as Pischayim. And by the way, these words lead us. It sounds the way Abaye would have understood. And this is the reason why Abaye, without Rabbi Yoshia, would have understood. Sha'al Manas Kain, Higdishu Yisrael. This is much more like Rabbi Yoshia, that the Pesach itself is not fully consecrated. There's a shiur in the Pesach, not on the money. This will be a kasha on Abaye. We'll get to that soon. Now, even though Rebbe uses the words that the owner, right, af michdei mekach, says the Gemara, what does Rebbe mean? Machlokes. Rabba v'Rab Zera chad omar like this. Be'etzim litzli yasoi. Let's say that the original group or the original owner, they're out of pocket. They have no cash flow. They don't even have money to buy wood to roast the Pesach. So if it's to use the money of new people joining for wood that is needed to roast it, kulam oloi pliga, the kiven, the takanta, the Pesachu, this is needed, you can't eat it. No, you have to roast it. Everyone agrees that kagu for the Pesach domain, you can use money for the roasting of the Pesach. Ki pligi, this is one version. When it comes, can you use the money that people are giving to buy their share, to buy matzah, to buy mother? The Rabbanan hold. Even for this, you can't. Imagine. Sabri achila achriti. Listen, it's a separate eating. It's taka mitzvah. And it has to be eaten together, but it's different mitzvahs. And Rebbe, that's the first version. That's not the way we learned the Braisa. That's not the way Rabbi Yoshe understood the Braisa. This is that Rebbe is not so liberal. Rabbi says that Kiven the Hechsheroi the Pesachu, since when you have a carbon Pesach, the Torah says Al Matzois Umaroidim Yerchlu. In other words, the way you make the eating of the Pesach valid is by adding the matzah, by adding the mother, so we can view it kegufa the Pesach dami. But Rabbi doesn't say that you can use the money for whatever you want. So holds one of these two Amoraim. However, v'chad Amar, and so is the Braisa, and so is Rabbi, and so is Abaye. But matzah umarer nami kol amolei pliga that you can use for matzah umarer, even the Chachamim, because since it says al matzah umarerim yechlu, and therefore kiven the machshir and the Pesach ninu, so therefore everyone holds ke Pesach dami. The machlokes in between Rabbi and the Chachamim ki pligi likach by chaluk. Can you buy a shirt? It's not a mashal, or likach by talis. Or really to do business with it. Rabbanan Savri, the whole limud that you can add more people after you bought it is from the mihi yois mise. It's amazing how the word mem, right, normally means from. But sometimes it's the opposite. It means to. Omar hachayeyu, not the owner should get his parnasa from the lamb that was already designated. It means that hachayeyu, you can use the money lisa. You have that interchange, like Mizmor lid David. Think about that. Not Mizmor lid David, it's Mizmor to God. Mizmor from David. Sometimes the Lamed and the Mem interchange, and so holds the Chachamim. However, Rebbe hold, no, Mem meant from. Hachayehu atzmacha, you make your living by selling yourself. Nikuda. Okay, so what did we say? That if not for Rabbi Oishia, Abaye would have learned pshat in Rebbe that the Rebbe holds the shiur in the money. Problem is, it doesn't fit in the words of the Baraisa that we just quoted.
Rabbi, this machlokes of Rabbi of Zera.
Yes.
Is that also dependent on whether you say it's in the money or the animal, or it doesn't matter which one?
Makir, the first of these two, the one who's saying that even Rebbe doesn't allow you to use the money for anything.
Still limited.
He holds there is no shiur, not in the animal nor in the money. There's no shiur, which is taka, and therefore ein hagdish halal hagdish. So the money remains holy. If the money is holy, that's the word. Only use it for something holy. Really, it has to be used for kachim. Chiddush is that matzah matter. It's hechsheda the Pesach v'chuli. Oh, now ulabayah the Omar I lav the oikman av oisha lahahi. That's the Mishnah in Tamura. Then mamana zoni al pischoi. That it goes according to Rabbi. That Abaye would have understood pshat in the Mishnah and Tamura that it follows shit of Rabbi Yossi Aglili b'kachim kalim that holds kachim kalim mamin ba'olam, which is beautiful, which is why you would have thought that since it's mamin ba'olam, if you gave that as payment to a zoyna, it should have become asur. If not for the Torah writing the words l'chol neder prat l'nadur, and when it comes to Pesach, I would have learned pshat that in the animal when mishayt inish. But why would Abaye say that? When in Rebbe, read the words. It says, Almanas kein higdishu Yisrael espischei mashma, that the limit is in the animal. So the Gemara says, no, Abaye would have learned pshat in this statement, Almanas kein higdishu Yisrael mo'oi espischei. Elam, bottom line is that just like there's a klal that Amoraim don't argue with Tanoim. Here you see that the latter Amoraim, Abaye, when he learned a teaching of Rabbi Oishia, and from that he understood how he understood Pshat and Natana, he was makabelit. He just let everyone know that if not for him, I would have learned otherwise. But now that Rabbi Oishia understands that Pshat in Rebbe is that there is a shiur in the animal, I agree to that, which is an amazing concept. This is beyond Mamin Ba'alim. This means that when we buy Mashiach, we're going to buy a lamb to understand our intent. That means that when we buy an animal, we have to have that kavanah. This animal is not yet fully a Pesach. We want to have an option until the shechita to include more people. Now we can gift it or we can sell it. I want to have the option of selling it. And how can I sell something that's not mine? Or what will I do with the money? Some of the animal, how much? I don't know. But there's a shiur in the kedusha. When does it become fully consecrated? When you shecht it. Okay, from here until the end of the Amid is all about someone who is not halachically fit to eat a carbon Pesach during the Avodah. The person will be fit at night, says the Mishnah, Zov, Shara, Shteida Iyos, for which you have to count 7 clean days. No karbanis have to be brought. So Sheichten Olav Bashvi, if the 7th day is the 14th, no karbanis have to be brought. He's not a Mechusar Kippurim. Good. However, but if he saw 3, means a side of Shivas Nikiyim, side of going to the mikvah, side of head of Shemesh, he has to bring tomorrow. He has to bring tomorrow the karbanos of the Zav. So then Sheikhtan Olav Bashmini Shaloi, not on the 7th, but yes, on the 8th. That means if the 8th day is on the 14th, you can bring it. Now, what's the chiddush? If he already brought his kinim, if he already brought his birds, if he already brought his kapara, then the chiddush is that the 14th is his 8th day. He did not bring it. When are we shechting the Korban Pesach? Guys, we had this after the Talmud. We learned the mitzvah say, Oleh, Hashlem, Kol, HaKorbanos Kulam, that the only exception of a korban that is allowed to be brought, the mitzvah say, after the Talmud is the Pesach. Now, he did not bring his kapara. So you would think, since he cannot bring it, how can you bring the Pesach for him? That's the chiddush of the Mishnah, says Rashi. The Hashlem kol hakabonis kulam, right? That's a mitzvah say. Pesach is kares. That the chumrah of Pesach trumps the oleh Hashlem. So you can have this guy in mind for the Pesach. He will bring his kapara, and then at night he'll be allowed to eat it. Next.
Why not even the day before?
Because
he doesn't have to actually bring the korbanos.
No, he'll have to bring it to eat it. He won't be able to eat kachim. He has to be able to eat it at night.
But how can he bring those korbanos if it's already past the Talmud and they don't do any other korbanos?
So because of the chumrah of Pesach Kares, we will make another exception. We will bring his kippurim after the Talmud. That's what Rashi says, because Hashlem is a Hashlem, but there's no Kares. Okay. Shmenes, similarly. So you have a Zajac Ketana, we don't have time to speak out here what it means, but you have a Zajac Ketana that she has to count 1 clean day. So if her 1 clean day is on the 14th, Shmenes Yom Keneged Yom, Shoichten Olah B'Sheni Shalah, that means on the first clean day. Now we admit, guys, that if after, we learned this, what happens if she sees dam afterwards? That was the Tumas Tohoim. Stop, she won't see blood. She goes to the mikvah on the day. Let's speak in the positive. And she did not see any blood on that day. At night, she's full-fledged Tohoira. And therefore, you bring it for her. Similarly, if Ra'asa Shnei Yomim, the din is that if a woman sees blood during the 11 days that follow the 7 days, she also only has to keep 1 clean day. She goes to the mikvah during the day. If that 1 day is on the 14th, that's the 3rd day, Sheikhtan Olah B'Shlishi, which is Sir Shemeres Yom, and Shalom Al Yisrael. The question is going to be if she becomes a Zajac Gedolah. Same thing. Zajac Gedolah, not only does she need to have Shivas Nikiyim, but on the 8th day, she has to bring korbanos. So if the 7th day is on the 14th, she cannot bring a Korban Pesach. Because even though at night, she won't have the higher level of Tumah, but she can't eat kachim. But what you do is, Shachtin Olah Bashmini, and the same thing we had above, is if the 8th day is the 14th, even though she did not bring her kippurim, even though the Korban Talmud Shel Ben Arbayim was brought already, she will be part of Pesach Rishon. Why? Because they're going to bring her korbanos after the Korban Talmud, during the time that they're bringing the Korban Pesach. And then she'll be allowed to eat the korban at night. Okay, based on the rule of the Mishnah, that the Mishnah is basically saying that even if you are tamei now, during the avodah, we don't care. The only thing we care about is you need to be fit at night. However, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. We see from the Mishnah, Sheichten v'zarchen al tvul yoyim. Right? Likewise, Mechusar Kippurim. That's the din. In other words, the person now could be unfit. Only thing we care about is during the time of eating, whether the person will become fit. Daf Tzadik Amud Beis. Having said that, here's the Chiddush of Rav. Bamba. Question is why? So if someone becomes tummy in a much lower level of tumah, he's only a rishon. All you need to do is go to the mikvah and wait until the night. No karbanos. Nevertheless, he cannot be part of the Korban Pesach. Now, there's something I'll add now which will shed a lot of light. And it's clarification. In other words, it's something that we never spoke out before because that's a big part of Tzadik Amud Beis. The chiddush of today's daf is that even Rav that holds Ein Sheichten V'Zorken Al Tamei Sheretz, you know what that means, my friends? It means that if when you're doing the Shechita and the Zerika, he did not yet go to the mikvah, then he cannot be included. But if he became Tamei on the 14th with the Sheretz and he went to the mikvah, you know what this Jew is called? He's not called a Tamei Sheretz. You know what he's called? He's called a Tful Yoim. He's called a Tful Yoim. A Tful Yoim, that's what Rav began at the last line on Tzadik Amud Aleph, that on a Tful Yoim you do bring it. In other words, if all that is needed for him to be fit to eat kachim is time, is sunset, which happens automatically, even Rav says that he could be part of the Korban Pesach. When it says Ein Sheichten Uzarcham Tmei Sheretz, it means that if he did not yet go to the mikvah, so what's needed is for him to do an action and sunset, then he cannot be included. However, Ula disagrees with Rav, and Ula holds even if he did not go to the mikvah. So what? All he needs to do is to go to the mikvah, wait until sunset. At night, which is the only time that you can eat it, you can't even eat it during the day, he'll become completely fit. Ula holds Sheichten Uzarcham Tmei Sheretz. Trek the Gemara Rav, Mishnah Tful Yoim, Tzadik, the last line of Aleph, and Tful Yoim means even if the Tuma came from a Sheretz, if he already went to the mikvah, why could he be and why should he be included in the Korban Pesach? Because the Chazil Orta. Because at night, Zman Achila, he'll be fit. So Tmei Sheretz Nami. Tmei Sheretz is Chazil Orta. Rishon answers the Gemara, yeah, but Mechusar Tefilla, he didn't yet go to the mikvah. Asks the Gemara, well, Tful Yoim also you need Mechusar head of Shemesh. There's something needed still. Answers the Gemara, you can't compare apples and oranges. Shimsha, Memela Arva, sun will set automatically. That's why even Rav allows him to be included. That's the whole Mishnah. However, when it comes to Mei Sheretz, he didn't go to the mikveh yet. That's an action. He can't do it yet. Now we got a problem. Problem is that in our Mishnah, we didn't only learn about the Zav, that all the Zav that Sor Tura'iyas needs to do after he went to the mikveh is just to wait until night. The Mishnah spoke about people that have to bring kapara. That's also an action. And the Mishnah says that they can be included. Mechusar kipurim nami, mechusar kapara. So Rav limited that din in the Mishnah. That's only if shekinoi biyodoi. They already own the birds. Still, it's not good enough of an answer. Just because you own the birds, you still have to bring it. The Gemara is going to challenge. Tmei Sheretz Nami mikveh lefanov. You have it. It's biyodai. So biyodai is not enough. And says, Dilma Pasha. Well, just because there's a mikveh, maybe he won't go to the mikveh. Well, counters the Gemara. Yachid mechusar kipurim nami Dilma Pasha. So again, Rav limits the Mishnah. Do you know when the Mishnah said in both cases that the mechusar kipurim could be included bashmini shaloi? It's only when they already gave their birds or the money for the birds to the Beis in the Beis Hamikdash. Kigoin de masrinu lebeis din and uchederav shemaya that says chazaka ein beis din shel kayhanim oim de misham on that day ache yichlu moishe b'shofros. Right, that was the whole sin of Bnei Eli. That even though we learned that even though it says in the pasuk that they slept with married women, it didn't mean that. It just meant that they were the anomaly, that they did not take that care to make sure that her kingdom were brought that day. So they delayed for her to be able to go back home, to be with her husband. But coming over here, once you give it over to the shofros, which is money, or once she chose to buy the birds herself and she gave it over to the Kahanim, it's considered a done deal. Now asks the Gemara, it comes out over here, that's the premise of the Kasha, that even Rav, on a biblical level, you can bring it for Tmei Sheretz. The reason why Rav says Ein Sheichten Uzarcham Tmei Sheretz is because by Dilma Pasha. Dilma Pasha sounds like Isaac Zayda Midrabanan. If that would be Pshat in Rav, asks the Gemara, Ula Rav, it sounds like the Midoynaisa Mechse Chazit. Elomat, only the Rabbanon the Gaz of the Bay. So Alama Amarav, guys, we had this enough pay that when you have exactly half of the people are Tmeim Mace, half of the people are Tohiden. Whether you have to have a majority of one, whether you have to have a majority of two, but you want to create a majority of Tmeim in order to activate the dispensation of everyone being allowed to bring the Pesach Rishon. So Rav says, Mitaman Echem Mehem B'Sheretz. Here's my problem. If someone who's Tmei Sheretz is not fit biblically, so that's the solution. You made a roiv Tmeim. But if the whole pshat is Dilma Pasha, that's a derabanan, Rav gave the solution. Rav is saying that it's only a derabanan. If on a doiraisa dika level, you don't have roiv Tmeim, you cannot activate midoiraisa, the dispensation of bringing Pesach Betumah. Says the Gemara, Ella, you don't understand Rav over here. L'Rav mido'iraisa nami loy chazei. Now, when Rav said on top of the Amid that the Ein Sheicht and the Zochen Altamei Sheretz, even though if he would have gone to the mikvah, then he is included. But if he didn't go to the mikvah, you can't bring it for him. It's based on a pasuk in Bahal Loischa, where it says, Ish ki yatomei lo nefesh. So mi lo yaskinan is this pasuk not also speaking about someone that shechal shvi shaloi Eliyas be'erev Pesach? That the Tamei Nefesh was also someone who's in the final day of Tamei Meis, which means someone who only has to wait until night. The Hainu to Masheretz. And yet, that's the part, that's the Bahal, that's Pesach Sheni. But Amar Achmana Nitche. So he brought a raya that if aside of just waiting for time, there is an action that has to be done, you can bring it. And if you're going to say, how do you know that the pasuk in Bahal Loischa is speaking about someone that is already on the seventh day? Maybe the whole story of Ishki Yatamei Lo Nefesh, Parshas Bahal Loischa were for Yidden that were during the first 6 days. Maybe not on the seventh day, no. Because Rav learned, like Rabbi Yitzchak, and Rabbi Yitzchak says two statements, and we're going to focus here on the second one. First of all, how did the Yidden in the desert become Tamei Lo Nefesh? Did they not know that they're going to have to bring the Korban Pesach? They knew that. We had Pesach Mitzrayim. They already knew the dinim of the Torah. So first of all, how did it come about? You should know that the Omar, Tamei Meis, or Tamei Meis Mitzvah. Meis Mitzvah means so many things. First of all, what happens if a Yid lost one of his 7 close relatives, right before Pesach? There's a mitzvah to be occupied on the burial. That's Tamei Meis Mitzvah. Or you can have someone who no one else will be occupied with. Oichta Meis Mitzvah. It was all Meis Mitzvah. And look at what Rabbi Yitzchak added. Shachal Shviya Shol Niyas Berev Pesach. And how did Rabbi Yitzchak get that second part? He was medayik in the words of the pasuk. Shenemar v'lo yochlu lasos haPesach b'yom hahu. Why b'yom hahu? He should have said v'lo yochlu lasos haPesach. So from that is medayik Rabbi Yitzchak b'yom hahu the einim chayon lasos. But they were on their 7th day. That's why they thought they can bring it. Aval l'machi chayon lasos. That also explains how pinigla the lama nigara. What do you mean lama nigara? Because you're tummy. No, they had a leg to stand on. They felt that they only have to wait until at night they'll be tohirim. In other words, Rav's source is biblical. So Rav stands that ein sheichten v'zorchan tamei sheretz midei oiraisa. As long as he didn't go to the mikveh. Says the Gemara, why we're not so happy yet. We're not done yet. The Gemara kasha not from our Mishnah. Tanan, it says in our Mishnah, Zof sherosh teide iois sheichten olav bashvi. And my love that this even includes a zav that did not yet go to the mikvah. An action still has to be done, and yet the Mishnah says v'shamamino sheichten v'zorchan al tamei sheretz. Says the Gemara, no, Rav must have learned the Mishnah that the zav was already the tavel. Yi tavel my kamashmalon. Answers the Gemara, ha kamashmalon afal gav the mechusar head of shemesh. So kamashmalon the Mishnah that since the shimsha memela or the sun sets automatically. Nothing is automatic. Everything is God's doing. Automatic means that this is God's doing, not our doing. And that's why you include them. And again, that's a big clarification. That when you say ein sheichten v'zorken al tamei sheretz, Rav is only if that person did not go to the mikvah before the shechita. And furthermore, hachinam mistabra that's pshat in our Mishnah because it says me the tani sefer ra'o sholish re'iyos sheichten olav bashmini. We're speaking about the zav who had a major zav. That the case of the Mishnah of zav shirash teide iyos sheichten olav bashvi was only the Tavil, they already Taviled, only then. Now it makes sense why the Mishnah needed to add another case, bigger Chiddush. Itzrich, the second clause is Taka needed because nothing needs to be done. Only wait until sunset, right? And as the Chazal are saying the words Shimsha, Memela Arva, Avol Ra'a Sholish Bashmini. Which, what's the case? The case is that the kapara was not brought yet. The mechuser maisa, mechuser kapara loy, it's a big novelty. So then, Komash Mulon, the Mishnah spoke out this clause as well to tell you that afagav the yes, the mechuser kapara, nevertheless, sheichet v'zorken ilave, and taka why? We have to go with what we learned before. Because the Mishnah is speaking about a case where this zav already gave the money or the birds to Kahanim, only because of that. And because of the statement that we had above, of Rav Shemaya that chazaka ain't based in shol kehanim oimim shamat sheyichlu kol moishe b'shofes. That's the chiddush. But elo, this is all a raya. If I can out a raya to that, elai omra, that the case of the Mishnah, right, the first medium-sized line was Rosh Teire Iyos Bashvi, even the loy tavel. So then, what's the novelty in the new case? Then Rosh Sholeis Bashmini Lamali. Hashta Yeshloime Rosh Teire Iyos Bashvi, the loy tavel. Loy tavel means that you are completely tummy. The Tamei Aliyah, if the pshat in the Mishnah would have been like Ula, still Shachtin and Rezarkeni Lave. So for sure, Sholeis Bashmini, the Tavale Bashvi. And once you went to the mikvah, all these people that need many steps, it's not that they are completely tamei until the last step. Every step takes away some tumah. So when this Zav, Sholish Re'is, it has to bring karbanos on the 8th day. When he went to the mikvah already on the 7th, the Kalisha Tumah, the Tumah is weaker, is like Kolchrein, the Shachtinim Zarkin and Ilave. So not only is our Mishnah not a kash against Rav L'chayre Tzaraya to Rav, Elav Shmami no, that when the Mishnah said the Ra Shtei the ears Bashvi the Shlinili Lavi, it's only the Tavel. Or you can word it. This now becomes a kash on Ula, but no. Says the Gemara. Listen, we're not going to refute Rav, but you cannot prove to Rav Loi Nishkanaya. It could be, but it's not a proof because I can learn La'olam Eimelach that the case of the first clause of the Zav of Tura Iyos. When the Mishnah says that you are allowed to bring it, maybe it's even if the loy tavel. Why did the Mishnah have to say the second clause? There's a need. It's guys, don't forget that even though I have to take an action, but it's only up to me, and that's a tremendous empowerment. I have to go to the mikvah. But when it comes to the 8th day, even if this zav, it will do everything right, but Yisrael does not bring a carbon. He is dependent on the kohen. So maybe that loy the ein biyadi lahakrev carbon, and maybe pasha bekohanim. So I will tell you that's the chiddush. And why? Because we followed Rav Shemaya that kohanim may be halachically 100% relied upon. But in the Mishnah is not a raya, but there's no refutation, so we remain with this machlokes of Rav and Ula. Let's go back to it. It's getting late. So then the Mishnah spoke about a zava, that if on the 8th day, she's on her 8th day, even though she did not bring her kippurim, again, she already gave her birds to Kahanim. The Kahanim didn't bring it yet. They are allowed to bring it after the Talmud. She can be included in the Shechit. Says the Gemara, Tanach Hameid Rav Ada Barahaba. Right, these people that knew all of the Brisas by heart, the Brisa teachers, was quoting the following prior unknown or not that known Brisa, that V'hazava shoichatin oleha bashvi shalah. Now, Zava meant a Zava Gedoyla, because if not, you call her Shemeres Yom Keneged Yoim. Now, that doesn't work, because on her 7th day, guys, understand something. When she brings on the 7th day, she can't eat on the 8th day. She cannot eat on the 8th day. Amalash, Zava, bashvi shalah michazya. Afilu l'manda Omar Ula. That's Sheikhtim Zajac l'mei sheretz. That's Hanemile t'mei sheretz. Because if the person will go to the mikvah, the chazi l'urta. But this woman, right? If her 7th day is on the 14th, she cannot eat it that night. She can only eat it after she brings the karbanis. The karbanis of her kippurim are brought on the next day. Ad l'machar d'maisir kapara lechazya. So your statement, you're chazaning by heart, you made a mistake. And he's talking said it must be that this Baraisa said that Bahazava Shoichtin Oleh Bashmini. If it's Bashmini, Pshita. So no, back says, well, it's not Pshita. Mal the Tame given the Mechasri Kapara, Loi, Kamash Malon, Kid Rav Shemaya, that we can rely on the Kahana. Ravina, another emendation in the Baraisa. What the Baraisa really says, Nida Tanach Hameid. That Vahanida Sheikhtin Oleh Bashvi. Now, guys, here is the catch. I know that nowadays, now before Mashiach, it's all about the Nida going to the mikvah for her to be Tehoida Labala. But there's another aspect of Nidus, and that is she's Tameya. B'chlal, when it comes to people going to the mikvah, again, we are familiar with Nida goes at night. All other women that are Tameyim Labaleim, they go to the mikvah during the day. Shemeres Yom Keneged Yoim. When a woman counts Shivas Nekiyim, which is only a Zava, she goes to the mikvah during the day. It's only the Nida that goes to the mikvah during the night, and now we have a problem. That's Takadin Doiraisa. If a Nida goes to the mikvah during the night, so when can she eat kachim? Every time you go to the mikvah weakens the tumah, but then you have to wait until sunset to eat kachim. Since a nida can only go to the mikvah at night, if her 7th day is on the 14th, she cannot be included. I'll tell you why. Because when will she go to the mikvah? At night. Let's go with Ula. She'll go to the mikvah. So what? You know when she can eat kachim? The next night. She needs after the mikvah a new sunset. Again, nida, the first wide line. Shoichten Allah bashvi. No, Amalei is nida bashvi michazia. I feel that's only because the chazia laurta. However, second white line, nida laurta the shvi who the tabla. She only goes to the mikvah at night, which means ad shemini the of the head of shemesh means until the next night loy chazia. So here again, in Ravina's version of the Braisa, that the Braisa is not speaking about Azava, yes, speaking about a nida. Just like before, we went from the 7th to the 8th. Here also, we're going from the 7th to the 8th. Ela ema bashmini. That if her 8th day is on the 14th, you bring it for her. Ay pshita. Hashta umazava. That even though an act has to be done, the machasir kapara. Nevertheless, sheikh bashmini. So nida, the machasir kapara. She went to the mikveh yesterday. All she needs to do is to wait until at night. Is there a need for a Braisa to say the shachar was working aleh? So the Gemara says yes. You know why yes? Because someone erroneously might have thought that midoiraisa a nida goes to the mikveh during the day. And if that would have been the case, then even on the 7th day she can be included. The Braisa is telling you that a nida can only be included if the 8th day is on the 14th, to emphasize that even on a doiraisa dika level, a nida only goes to the mikvah at night. Nida israchalei ha kamash bulan, to make it clear that only bashmini in and bashvi'i loy, a nida may not go to the mikvah during the day. And kedatanya, we're going to have the Sunan Yuma. We're not allowed to bathe. One of the 5 Yinoim is not bathing on Yom Kippur. However, if someone is mechuyev to go to the mikvah on that day, they go to the mikvah on Yom Kippur. We don't do this nowadays. And what does that mean? Says the Braisa that call chayovei tefillos, the ones that are tefillosim by Yom. For example, tefillosim by Yom, and if the 7th day, let's say of a Zov is on Yom Kippur, the Braisa says he goes to the mikvah on Yom Kippur. Then the Braisa says the exceptions of people, the only 2 exceptions of people that don't go to the mikveh during the day, which is a nida and a yoledes. If you remember the dinei Torah, that let's say after 7 days after a boy, after 14 days after a girl, she goes to the mikveh, and then she has her yemei toihad, dam toihad, but she has to go to the mikveh. She only goes to the mikveh at night. And indeed, like we learned, what happens if the night is on Yom Kippur? What happens if the 7th day from the beginning of Yemei Nidus was Erev Yom Kippur, and the night is the night of the 8th? The Tanya Yochel Tehei Toivelis Mibo Yoim Talmud Loimer Shivas Yomim Tehiyei Benidasa. She can't go to the mikvah during the day. This is a Braisa explaining why she is allowed to go to the mikvah on Yom Kippur at night. We don't do it nowadays because biblically a nida has to go to the mikvah at night. How do you know that? Because since it says in Parshas Mitzoira that Shivas Yomim Tehei Benidasa, what does that mean? That Tehei Benidasa Kol Shiva, she shall be in her nida status for all of the 7 days. You're not going to make a Kalisha Tuma. You're going to have to wait until the night. And furthermore, the Gemara says you led this based on a pasuk in Tazria, where Makish led this to a nida. So all of this is just backing up this need for the Braisa to say that you can shech the Koren Pesach on a nida on her 8th day. You know, the Chiddush is to make it clear that not on the 7th day. Because if a nida would have been allowed to go to the mikvah during the day, then biblically she would be included on the 7th day as well. But we don't say that. She can only go to the mikvah 7th night. She still needs, after mikvah, you need the next sunset. The next sunset is 8 at night. 8 at night is after the Zman Achila. So only on her 8th day is when she's allowed to have the Pesach brought for her. Still, there's a chiddush here because when you're bringing it, she's not yet allowed to eat kachim. But that's what we're learning. This is l'kula alma. Even according to Rav, if no action needs to be done, if all you need to wait is for something automatic, then the Pesach could be shechted, and then you eat it when you become completely fit, God willing, to be continued.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.